Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And today's episode is admittedly a little meta because we're going to talk about recruiting with someone who's building a company that does recruiting. So it's a little unusual. I think you'll get a hang of it pretty quickly. My guest is Karson Humiston. Karson is the founder and the CEO of Vangst, a 70-person company, fast-growing, based in Denver. And they've quickly become a leading hiring company in the cannabis industry, which, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you know is on fire. And so she's going to walk us through not just about the business, but how she built her own team and became ranked as one of the Forbes 30 under 30. She's been ranked as the leader of an entrepreneur 100 brilliant companies. She's on fire herself. So with all that, welcome my guest, Karson Humiston. Hey, Karson.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the nice intro.
My pleasure. Welcome to the show. So why don't we start at the high level with what is Bankster? Then we can talk about why you decided to start it, and then we can kind of go from there. So 60 seconds on kind of what is the business all about?
Vangst is a recruiting platform for the cannabis space. And this is an industry that has created, in a very short amount of time, over 300,000 jobs full-time, expected to more than triple over the next 5 years. And there are tons and tons of jobs being created. And so we saw a need to build a platform specific to this industry to help the businesses address their unique hiring needs as they launch and scale in a very regulated market. Got it.
So it's a very tight vertical focus on the cannabis industry. And is it focused primarily on the U.S.?
U.S. and Canada today.
Got it. Okay, awesome. And the model, is it primarily online, kind of like a job board model and database model, or is it more a human recruiting and staffing company?
We connect cannabis businesses and candidates in two ways. So the first is through our platform, our on-demand platform. And when people are looking to find temporary short-term gigs, they can build a profile and apply to the various gigs. And from a company's perspective, if they're looking for short-term help, maybe they need trimmers for 2 weeks, bud tenders for a month, or maybe a bud tender just doesn't show up one day and they need urgent help, they can post their gig and then the candidate can apply. And from a company standpoint, they can see, oh, wow, this candidate has worked 900 hours through the Vangst Gigs platform. They have consistent 5-star rating. They have these reviews from these trusted other companies. And so that's one way that we connect cannabis businesses with employees. And the other way is through our direct placement business, where we have recruiters focusing on the various verticals of the space. So cultivation, extraction, retail, and ancillary. And so candidates will go to our platform, they'll build a profile, and then they'll actually be in touch with a live human recruiter who will then match them with a client. So there's one that's very technical and lower touch, and the other is a little bit higher touch from actual people.
Got it. So you're doing it both online and offline. That's great. So how did you decide to start this? You started it about 3.5 years ago or so. What led you to think of the concept, other than you knew cannabis was growing? Why this business? Why Vangst?
Yeah, so we're about to have our 3rd official birthday, which is exciting.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Time flies. So when I was an undergrad at St. Lawrence in upstate New York, I was doing a small business called On Track Adventures. It was a student travel company. And towards the middle of my senior year, I realized I didn't want to do student travel forever, and was thinking about what I was going to do next, and started thinking, wow, everybody's trying to find jobs, and jobs is a pain point and a stress point. So I sent an email out asking everybody what industries they were most interested in getting jobs in. And sure enough, more than 70% came back saying they were interested in jobs in the cannabis space. So like I said, this was 3 years ago. We were in upstate New York, where cannabis was not the industry that it is today in Colorado. Certainly wasn't that way in New York. Didn't know a lot about it. So I took a trip out to Colorado to a trade show, a conference, and I was just really impressed by all the types of businesses that existed. Like I was mentioning earlier, from cultivation companies to extraction companies to retail businesses like these dispensaries to ancillary businesses. And when I say ancillary businesses, I'm meaning the businesses, the picks and shovels of the space, the businesses that aren't necessarily touching the plant but supporting the industry. So a recruiting company like ours, a B2B marketplace like LeafLink Technologies, a media company, right? There's all these businesses that are supporting the space. And so there's all these types of businesses. And then I asked the companies what positions they were hiring for, and so many types of positions, from a director of cultivation to a cultivation manager down to a trimmer to a director of extraction to a chemist to an R&D professional to just extraction technicians. And then on the retail side to a retail store manager, assistant store manager, inventory buyer, bud tender.
Right.
You know, and there's just all these types of positions. And I asked the businesses, how do you find your employees? And they said, I'm not kidding. Every single business said this is a massive pain point for us. We can't find employees. If we do find employees, they often don't have the requirements of our specific state. People don't want to work in the industry because it's cannabis. Traditional recruiting platforms won't let us on because of cannabis. You know, big recruiting agencies won't work with us.
So there was a huge need, right? A huge trend. Just people are just stuck. Where do I find people? Where do I get people? And so you stepped in and you saw that as an opportunity.
Yeah, basically.
Great. I love it. Love it. So now you're at 70 people in the company. Let's shift to how you've built your own team, who are less focused on cannabis, I guess, and more focused on hiring and recruiting. You probably have software developers, the whole mix. What have been the main ways that you found your folks to build that 70-person team in Denver?
Yeah, your hiring changes as the business grows. And so initially, we were very heavy on hiring sales and recruiters, right? Folks to help us go out and build relationships with businesses. So in the beginning, it was very heavy on individual contributors, right? Especially when we didn't raise any capital until almost over 2 years into the business. And so we were having to find people that could, immediately get ramped up and start driving revenue. So that was initially what the hiring was focused on. And then as we started to scale, then you get into a place where you have to start hiring managers and leaders to manage the people. And then, I think that's a totally different type of skill set than an individual contributor. And so, I really think that for us, started out focusing on sales and recruiters, and we started hiring managers. And then as we started building on a tech platform, of course, we started hiring engineers and product people and product manager and engineering manager and so on.
Got it. Well, walk us through at a high level. You don't have to go through every step, but walk us through kind of your typical hiring process of how you've done this. You obviously source candidates, but once you find candidates, what do you do next? Do you have a disciplined, kind of rigorous step-by-step process, or how do you do it?
Yeah, it's changed over time. I mean, like now now we have a full HR department, so I can tell you how the process is now, but obviously it's evolved. So we have an internal recruiter who will do the first interview with candidates at a high level. She really understands our business and get a sense of. She works very closely with the hiring manager to understand what the hiring manager is looking for. So she'll do the initial phone or video screen. If she likes them, then she'll send them to the hiring manager. After that, she and the hiring manager will meet the candidate in person. And then the final step is meeting with me. And at that point, it's more of a cultural interview, right? I rely really heavily on our internal recruiter, Kendall, as well as the hiring manager to make sure that this person has the experience and the skills to get the job done. And then I'm more getting an understanding of, will this person fit in with our culture long term? Do they, are they visionary? Do they see where we're going? Are they going to be able to roll with the punches and pivot? Would I want to go and have a beer with this person? Can we get along with this person? And so then that's sort of the last step is it's with me, and it's more of a cultural interview.
So tell us about the cultural interview, because I think where a lot of our listeners get stuck is they're okay on the competency interviews. Does this person have the skills to do the job? But when it comes time to figuring out if they fit the culture, they get stuck. So how do you do that? How have you learned to do that?
I think it's important to define a few things that are really necessary in your culture. And so for us, growth is a huge part of our company culture. We're growing really quickly, and everyone's doing a lot of different things. And so we've found success in people who have been with startup and high growth companies. And so I'm always looking for people to tell me stories about or experiences of times where things have been chaotic within their company and they've had to do jobs outside of the realm. So I'll give you an example. The first person that we hired on the accounting team, she started as a bookkeeper and she then went to accountant and now she's a senior accountant. We had a scenario the other day where we were going to this trade show and 2 salespeople couldn't go for whatever reason. And our accountant stepped up and said, "Oh, I'll go and work the booth." And so now we have an accountant. Yes. Yeah. We have an accountant standing at the booth saying to people walking around, "Hey, I'm Jenny. Let me help, let me talk to you about Vangst. We help people find jobs. What's your background? Let me get you onto our platform, blah, blah, blah." And it's whenever we're interviewing people and I'm interviewing people in these culture things, I ask myself, if something crazy happened and we needed a salesperson to step in and send invoices out, right? Would they throw a complete fit or would they step up to the plate and do it? We're just all used to pivoting all the time and jumping in to do whatever it takes for the whole team to get to the next level. And so, looking for examples like that, something that I found. And, you got to really have to kind of go with your gut, right? As the founder, I think your business and who will fit in and who won't. And so if you start to feel, one thing that I think we made a mistake of is, we think I used to be in an interview and something just wouldn't feel right about the candidate. But, I would say, well, they have all this experience and everyone speaks so highly of them.
You would look the other way.
It doesn't feel right. I'd look the other way. And then, sure enough, a few months later, regardless of all the experience and everything else, something didn't feel right and then something absurd happened. And so I think people do need to go with their gut, and especially founders.
So when you let someone into the company, right, joining your family essentially, and you realize you've made a mistake, so there is a culture fit difference, not a skill set issue, but a culture issue. What do you do? And you don't need to name names, but maybe give us an example of where you realized that you should have done this, but you did that. How do you fix it?
So what I'll say is that I don't think you can change people. I think you can coach people on skills. And right, if someone doesn't know how to use a CRM and is messing up using a CRM, you can train them on how to use the CRM. It's a Southwest line. You can teach people how to push the cart up and down the aisle. You can't teach people how to smile, something like along those lines. And I think that's so true. So if you start noticing a cultural disconnect, you should move on quickly, right?
But let's say you've already extended the offer. They're in the company, so you've hired them.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. You got to get them out.
So how do you do that? How long do you give them? How do you do it? It's not like you can say you're missing your numbers, right? And you've been told this 10 times, we got to part ways. It's a softer thing, right? It's a cultural thing. How have you learned to kind of have that discussion?
Yeah. Obviously you need to do what you need to, there's a lot of legal components involved, right? You need to make sure that you're covering your bases. And so if you have a person who is lying, right, that's not going to work in our culture. So you need to say to them, hey, here's an example of where you just completely lied. We're going to document this because this goes against our company's core values. And this is a warning. And then if they lie again, which likely a person that lies one time is going to lie again, then you have the first time trail and you say, hey, you just lied again. It's time for us to go our own ways. Move on. Document it the first time it happens, and likely it will happen again. Like in my experience, you can send them, books on, how to not lie, and it's probably not going to help them. So I just would say document and work on a plan to get them out of the company. Got
it. As we start to wind down, how do you teach your managers how to do this? So you made the point that as a founder, you are to such a large extent the culture, the DNA of the company. You're at 70 people. Presumably pretty soon you won't be able to interview every person, every finalist. How do you teach your managers how to do that?
Yeah, you really need to spend, what it comes down to is spending a lot of time with your direct reports and truly being able to trust your direct reports to be an extenuation of you. So I have now 6 direct reports, which is so crazy because I think a year ago I had like probably 36 direct reports. So anyway, I have 6 now, and I have just an incredible relationship with them, and I would go to bat with them on anything, and they would do the same for me, and I completely trust them. But that did not happen overnight, right? So one of our direct reports, our chief revenue officer, she was actually a mentor to me, was an advisor to Vangst, and we've gotten to know each other over 3 years, and then ultimately she started working for us. But that trust did not happen overnight. But now we're at a place where we've spent so much time. I think she can kind of read my mind. I can kind of read her mind. She would know what I would think would be the right decision because we've spent hours and hours and hours and have had so many meals together, had so many conversations, have gone through so many good times, have gone through so many bad times. And so my advice would be, before you say, hey, I'm not going to interview anybody, really trust in your, gut. Don't just say like, yeah, I think I trust this person. Like, you need to truly trust the person.
Yeah.
And then pass it off. Yeah.
And if you don't, then they shouldn't be interviewing people.
No, exactly. Like that's a mistake. I'll tell you firsthand, we've made that mistake. I had a direct report, and I was trying to do the thing. I was getting advice from all types of people saying, you got to get out of the day to day. I can't believe you're interviewing every single person, which I think is terrible advice. And I can't, at least until we're at 500 people, I'm sure I can carve out 5 minutes, a day to have even just a handshake, hey, how's it going type person with everyone that we hire. And that's just my personal philosophy. But anyway, I got into this place where I wasn't going to do that because, I thought that's, everyone was giving me advice that I shouldn't be doing that. Right. So I listened. And another example of follow your gut. Don't listen to what everyone else is telling you. You know your business better than everyone, whatever. So we have a manager who ultimately doesn't end up working out. He or she, whoever it was, makes some hires without me being involved. They're more in line with that person than what my vision is. And then before you know it, you have an entire department that isn't worked out. And it was a symptom of not being able to truly trust the manager and delegating before I could truly have that relationship. So the advice would be, before you delegate, really trust the manager.
Yep. Totally get it. Great advice. You have built an unbelievable company in such a short period of time. I'm kind of in awe. What would you do differently? What advice would you give to someone who's starting a growth, company? What would you do differently in terms of the people strategy? Are there certain roles you would hire faster or differently or anything?
Yeah. 2 pieces of advice. Hire senior leaders or start building a relationship with senior leaders before you think you need them. So if you think that you're going to be at 100 people in a year and that draw out what that org chart looks like with 100 people. So draw where it is you're going. And maybe you don't have the funds to hire the amazing COO that you want, but in a year, if everything goes well, you will. So start to slow recruit, start building the relationship with those people, because then like I said, especially for me, but when you hire them, you don't have to take 3 years to then get to know them. So hire, and if you can afford to hire before you actually need it, do it, because having to work backwards it can be a nightmare. And that happened to us. We didn't hire senior people soon enough, and suddenly we had 60 people and minimal managers. And so that would be one piece of advice: hire before you need the people. Hire for where you're going. Is this, and then do that in every candidate that you hire. So when you're interviewing a candidate, say, is this candidate right for the next phase of Vangst? If you're hiring a sales manager that's managed 5 people, but you're going to have 50 people in a year, likely they're not the right fit for the next phase of Vangst. So maybe don't hire that person because you're going to outgrow them. And then piece of advice number 2 is use inexperience to your advantage. And so a lot of times people say, well, you don't have experience doing this, so you don't understand. But because you don't have experience, that could be how you think through something differently than everybody else. So in our business, everybody told us that tech wouldn't be able to replace the old school staffing way, right? And all these big staffing agencies that have been around for 80 years, tech would never be able to work to fill this. But because we weren't in old school staffing for 50 years, we thought through something that a lot of other people ignored. And that was our advantage, not having all the years of experience. So
you didn't have that baggage behind you.
You don't have bad habits, and you can think through it in a fresh light. And so don't let people freak you out about your lack of experience. Flip it on them that you can use it to think through things differently and to get creative, and just listen to yourself, right? It's especially on a first-time company. A lot of people are giving you a lot of advice, and listen to yourself.
I love it. Karson, thank you so much for making the time and telling us about Vangst. How can people learn more about the business or get in touch with you?
Vangst.com. We're actually rolling out a new website next week. So there'll be some great new things going live, and come visit us. And hopefully if you're interested in a job, we can help you find one.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.